There is so much local stuff to talk about. There really is. Just soccer, basketball, an assortment of things. But I have just looked up at my television, and on Get Up right now, Harry Douglas, who I do word association with Harry Douglas, and all I think of is an enraged Bo Bach, lifetime Atlanta broadcaster, shaking prescription pills and screaming about how he's not a homer. Harry Douglas plays for the Atlanta Falcons, or played, and is now predicting that the Falcons are going to go into Detroit and pull off an upset. Mike, play that sound for me before I go any further here, because I am jealous of something. I don't feel jealousy very often, but I am jealous right now, and I'll tell you what and why in a second.
I mean, you don't know anything about what you're talking about, and you have the nerve to call up here and say to me that we're trying to upsell the Falcons to you? Sir, you're not a Falcon fan. You haven't been. And if you have been, you don't know what you're looking at.
Stop being a homer, Bo. Get out of my
I'm the last who's a homer. Don't you ever call me a homer. Who the hell do you think has been saying the truth since 1973 on Atlanta radio? Who?
I feel like I've been saying the truth since 1973 on Miami radio. And the reason, that I am feeling something swelling inside of me that doesn't feel good is because I came in today and Jeremy asked me, "How you doing, Dan?" And my answer is, well, I get up every morning and I put on a cloak of sadness. And then we started talking about, like, is it a king's velvet robe? Whatever it is, it drapes on my shoulders and it's heavy. And what I see happening all over television now, sports television, Mike, there are so many people dancing and laughing and having a good time on sports television, genuinely enjoying themselves. It used to be starched and stiff, and now I am watching.
We used to be that.
I know. That's what I'm looking at.
We used to have spiced up Wednesdays.
That's correct. And that is what's happening to me right now, where I'm looking at my television on First Take, and I've got Mad Dog. I've got the worst version of Mad Dog aging that I'm married to. Part of the cloak of sadness. You'd think it would have jewels. Nope, it's just Stugotz snots, because he's still reaching into his nose while we're broadcasting, taking things out and rolling them in his fingers. Stugotz was going to be the aging version of Mad Dog. Unfortunately, Mad Dog is now better at being Stugotz than Stugotz is, and is doing it. He's had a rejuvenation, a radiant rejuvenation. So he did something on television yesterday I've never seen. On Disney television. On Disney television, where he says, you know what my Saturday is going to be? Drinking at noon, drugs after that, and then I'm betting $10K on Colorado. $10,000, because that's what he makes to do First Take, which is stealing money for him at this point. I have never seen a media member just say, yep, drinking, drugs, and gambling, that's my Saturday, and I'm jealous of him. I'm like, I want that to be my Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen a media personality say that. It's been Stugotz, who his entire time has been trying to be Mad Dog, but now Mad Dog has more fame than he's ever had because of the platform, and now he's actually becoming Stugotz a little bit,
You
too.
say this, Mike, but it's not true, and I'll tell you why it's not true. Stugotz concealed all of his drug use until he got to freedom. That was not something he was saying out loud. He certainly wasn't saying it like it was obvious in his performance. But he certainly, and every employer who tried to fire him also noticed it, but it wasn't something he was saying out loud.
I mean, he went to every Grateful Dead show.
Again, circumstantial evidence. Yes, his performance showed that he had short-circuited and fried all of his brain cells in a way that was obvious. But he wasn't saying out loud, you know what I'm doing during my sports analysis consumption time? I'm going to come on next week and talk about Colorado. And I'm telling you right now, I was high while I was watching. Not usually part of the commentary.
Pretty unexpected from Mad Dog, too. To be fair, like, this is This is a bit of a sea change for Mad Dog Russo.
He's talked about gummy use in the past, right? I think he said it here on this show that he was gone.
But I was shocked. I was shocked when he did it here too, because it's not something that I've heard. You keep that concealed, but I wonder if the normalization of marijuana everywhere has freed him to be maximum Mad Dog in a way that he's now taken the mantle from Stugotz. Stugotz thought that lane was for him.
It's shocking to see it on ESPN. Like, that's where it's shocking to see it. It's not shocking for Mad Dog to come on here where Stugotz is always talking about it and have him say all of these things about gummies. But for him to do it on ESPN Air, where ESPN is freedom for him, how?
It's not something I have seen before.
It's also not a great idea. Gummies are a nighttime thing. Almost exclusively, unless you're at a concert.
Depends which kind of gummies you're eating.
Yeah, gummies need to be a vibe, and it just doesn't match the vibe for watching.
Get some sativa gummies.
I understand. Look, I too have done gummies. I just wouldn't want to do them during a Saturday afternoon college football experience. Who wants to sink into their couch metaphysically?
Put it on the poll, please, Juju, at Le Batard Show. Gummies, afternoon thing or evening thing? But I can't help but be disoriented as my good friend Ricky Williams got run out of that league for marijuana, to see one of the guys most likely to rip him as a character assassination for daring to do marijuana, that all of it would get so normalized that my media member who's on ESPN representing old-timey media can't shut up about Bob Cousy, that guy is out there saying, yeah, I'm doing drugs on a Saturday.
I mean, the gummies do explain a lot of his basketball takes at this point.
Explain a lot about a lot.
I mean, he doesn't seem like a guy that you would say dabbles in the gummies.
I mean, $10,000 betting on games, like that's outside my price range by a lot.
Yeah, that's not exactly a unit for me.
That's a lot of, he has made a lot of money in this industry being a caricature of a sports media personality. Skip Bayless before Skip Bayless. Man, that dude invented argument television. That started with Francesa and Russo on the radio, and it infected everything in the coverage of newspapers, fandom, sports television, so much so that, and Stephen A's right when he tells me that I'm sanctimonious because I'm not looking for broad appeal. Stephen A's good going on Hannity. He wants more customers. He does not care what he has to do to get more customers. And he will go for broad appeal, and he will help make television what Ricky Lake and Jerry Springer and Morton Downey Jr. did. And it's just television. Like, it's there to be entertaining. It doesn't have to be something that adheres to a journalistic standard. ESPN decided that once as a business and now seems to be moving away from it, as ESPN's president says, and this is a quote. I was actually surprised to hear him say this way, and I found it a bit confusing because I don't think it can be true. He says, quote, Jimmy Pitaro says, quote, quality journalism has never been more of a priority at ESPN, end quote.
Yo, chicken thigh.
Tentita. Él lo sabe.
You just lost Chris Boynton.
It's hard to argue that it's that much of a priority when you're going into business with all of the leagues, and the leagues get to control some of their content. It's a hard argument to make credibly.
I mean, they're specifically appealing, as it's been reported, to these leagues, which already kind of own them, to have equity stakes in ESPN. Whoa. So the entities that you're covering journalistically will now own you?
Yeah, I don't like that.
I mean, it would make for a bit of a tricky situation if they aren't already in one, Dan?
They're already in that situation with an assortment of conflict of interest that allow Dana White to make his own productions. And also, Dana White is taking a very specific lane that other sports leagues aren't taking, which is my athletes can say whatever they want, and we're never telling them to apologize for anything. I'm sitting next to Trump, and this cavalcade of Alex Joneses and Russell Brands and Andrew Tates and Tucker Carlsons, like, we're taking that lane for sports fans. That's what we want.
But they've also laid off a lot of journalists, and they're reinvesting or diverting some of the talent funds to people that, while they do news breaks, Stephen A. news breaks all the time, and he may take offense to me not calling him an active journalist because he's got the bona fides to back it up, but he's more of a personality. Same thing with Pat McAfee. His show does break news. It has a tremendous guest list, but he's not a journalist per se, and you have guys like June Lee let go, and you have a College Game Day letting go of some of their more perennial journalists. So it's hard to believe Jimmy Pitaro when he says they value journalism more than ever when they're going to these leagues for equity, potentially, and when they're actually cutting the journalist.
When the leagues are owning the entities that cover them, and again, I'm a massive UFC fan. I love everything that's happening in the UFC, except for some things, but for the majority of it, it's a sport that I enjoy and I consume and I do content for at this company. When I hear that ESPN is now being possibly bought up by NFL, NBA, MLB, and having ownership stakes, it doesn't feel great.
Here's the thing about all of that, though, because people around here have heard me lament or tired of hearing me lament that something I care about, journalism, dedicated my life to it. I've been appalled and surprised that basically the people listening to this and many of the people just consuming things hate the media almost more than they hate anything else, that they will side with a Russell Brand, a drug addict, sex addict who, probably did some
Recovering.
Well, but an admitted drug addict and sex addict who during that time probably did some things that he doesn't even remember doing. They will just rush to the side of defense of Russell Brand, who has created a great brand for himself, being anti-mainstream media. Joe Rogan has built his empire as a Fear Factor host on top of the idea of people hate the media so much that they'll elect Trump on a platform of fake news. I don't care about your journalistic standards. But when it applies to sports and when it applies to business and customers, the state of Disney right now selling off pieces, maybe ESPN being one of them, they don't have to choose journalism as a business. The reason I was surprised is not because I think Pitaro's lying. You don't have to say that. Like, you can move away from it. And I don't think anybody would have an issue with you simply saying, hey, we're not in the journalism business anymore. We'll do some well-reported stories, but we can't with these partnerships. And let's call them partnerships. If we're partnering on business, that's antithetical to journalism. That is a conflict of interest of the highest order if we have to succumb to the dollar. I don't know why you can't just say that.
Programs and sports teams are also getting a lot more support for just blocking credentials. I don't know if you're following what's happened with Lincoln Riley, who before the season pulled the media aside and said he appreciates great work. All of a sudden, there's a beat writer that they don't necessarily agree with the perspective, and that beat writer has been suspended for a full season. Inter Miami had totally blocked
What's a
writers.
full season? I thought it was 2 weeks.
No, like I'm seeing full season now. Like initially it was 2 weeks, and now it's been protracted. I'll get an update on that.
This, as Northwestern goes down on a scandal that was reported by the student newspaper.
Inter Miami had blocked writers from The Athletic locally, and this is something that I know that you and Jeremy both have. Some of the greatest sports personalities going have gotten their start covering high school sports. Locally, a new company has acquired the rights to high school football, which in the state of Florida is massive. They don't allow for credentials anymore. Credential media aren't allowed to actually cover these games because they want to hog the video rights all to themselves. It's a terrible thing that's happening here locally. And you're seeing all sorts of support now for these teams and media entities to just cut off access to something that 20 years ago, the media would have had the fan support in terms of coverage. But now the media has been painted so successfully by the right and everybody else. And even Justin Fields invoked like going at the media. And we'll get to that a little bit later because it's a winning position. The media is such an enemy right now that you can do things that are unjustified and unfair
Well, and what's interesting about that is when you look at the media side of it, obviously you have them painted as the enemy, and no, they can't help us create these stories, because now you have players who are able to do it on their own and put their story out there with whatever their slant is. But this is also a product of COVID, where ultimately the journalists who were allowed into the locker room, who were given access, that we had all of this time before COVID came down and we had this social distancing, that access has been taken away. The access that we're given now, even where it's been quote unquote totally restored, is different now than where it was before for the beat writer in general. And so that's changed the way we do this too.
I could lament that selfishly. I can lament that because of course I'm going to. This is something that I care about. You threaten me when you take this away. But for the leagues and for the employees of the leagues that are playing games, I'm not sure it's not better. I don't need the media. I don't need your filters. I will do it myself. I can do social media. You are a relic. You are antiquated. I don't need to give you access, press passes, especially if your coverage isn't going to be favorable. I don't have to adhere to your journalistic standards in my huddle. My huddle is not a place for journalists. I can keep you out because my business is bigger, better, and more popular than your business.
And speaking of adhering to journalistic standards, I was wrong. You were right. It was 2 weeks. I read a tweet and I went on air with incorrect information. It's a 2-week suspension through September 28th that USC has implemented on this beat writer, and that is being met poisonously by the local media, because if you go through the offenses of said beat writer, one of the things cited was they didn't address the school president properly. They addressed the school president, who was a woman, by her first name.
Is this a byproduct of the people and everybody being distrustful and hateful of the media, or is this a byproduct of player empowerment now, where it's like, hey, I know you guys would write stuff about me that I didn't like, or do whatever, but now all of a sudden I can go on Podcast P and do whatever I want to do here or there. Like, I have the power now.
The answer to your question is yes. It's both of those things. This is meritocracy, democracy. The customer speaks. The public speaks on this. Jeremy mentioned COVID. This is happening a lot over the last couple of years to me. Le Batard is a decrepit wasteland now. I think it's our whole show. I don't think it's just me. Like when he said,
"Hey, man," I don't know about that.
No, I'm not.
Saw me at the pool yesterday.
I'm not saying that our show is a decrepit wasteland. I think this person is referencing our show, not me. I don't think this person is calling me a decrepit wasteland. Put it on the poll, Juju, at Le Batard Show. Is Dan a decrepit wasteland? Le Batard is a decrepit wasteland now. They were funny until COVID ruined all of their brains. Now it's just ultra left-wing liberal psychosis daily. Put that on the poll as well, Juju, at Le Batard Show. Roy, you're laughing like you're filled with left-wing liberal psychosis.
I'm progressive, Dan.
Like a madman. No, but the way that you're laughing is something that makes me feel like this person is right, that we are indeed a decrepit wasteland that has been consumed by ultra left-wing liberal psychosis daily. You're crazed. So put it on the poll, Juju, at Le Batard Show. Has our entire show become a decrepit wasteland that is just ultra left-wing liberal psychosis daily? Because there's plenty of local sports I want to talk about. There really is. There's some cool stuff going on. Mike Ryan is telling me that Messi is tired. He's tired of carrying around Apple and soccer and yeah. What do you mean 4 games?
It's been 4 games already.
He's played a lot of soccer in the last few years.
So much soccer for club and country. He hadn't really had an off season. He played the entirety of the League's Cup, which a lot of people are calling into. It's called a lot of people who should know better. People that cover the sport. I saw someone associated with FC Dallas was like, is anyone going to criticize Inter Miami for letting Inter Miami play Messi throughout the League's Cup? Keep in mind that Inter Miami beat FC Dallas in a spectacular game that actually went to penalties. I think there was a total of 8 goals in that game before it went to pens. Yeah, it's a trophy. It's a major trophy that they won because he played in everything. The American casual soccer fan and even beat writers' inability to go beyond what they can Google. Because when you Google Inter Miami season, you just see the main thing. And even when I'm trying to explain to Billy or Stugotz, like, it's a trophy. It matters. On Wednesday, they're playing for a trophy. This is a club that had won 0 trophies before. Winning trophies that guarantee you a spot in the Champions League is a major deal. But they keep pointing to the standings. Buddy, last place. Well, how good could he be? It's a really frustrating thing.
How many regular season games has he played?
He missed the last few because of the international break. He actually had a dramatic winner for Argentina.
Greg Cody thought he shouldn't have left at all. Greg Cody, I was waiting for you and Greg Cody to be here on the same day so that you could argue about this. Greg Cody was making the argument that he should play only for Miami.
He won a World Cup qualifier with a free kick. World Cup qualifiers are a big deal. Maybe Greg is polluted by the fact that the U.S. does not have to qualify for this World Cup as one of the hosts, but it's hard, especially in South America in that qualifying region. He did not play the second game, and what is going on with Messi now appears to be fatigue because trainers were not working on him and Jordi Alba when they came out of the game. It actually presents an interesting situation for the league because Fox had the rights. Most of the MLS games happen in the same TV window, except for a handful that are given FS1 priority on different days. It would appear that Fox had positioned Orlando City, which is one of Inter Miami's rivals and a good team in their own right, against Inter Miami for main network Fox, which means you would have had Cletus and a bunch of NFL announcers promoting coming up after the America's Game of the Week, Lionel Messi on network television. And now he is not playing. As Tata Martino said, Messi is not playing. Coincidentally, Inter Miami played a lot better after Messi left, thanks to Bobby Ballsacks.
Whoa. Tell me more about the 4-0 victory last night. I am not brave enough to brave what I-95 has become to get to that game at 7 p.m. I can't do there. I don't know.
I can tell you as someone that lives this, Dan, it took me 110 minutes to leave my house in Kendall, which is the populous center of Miami-Dade County, to watch a team called Inter Miami. It has Miami in its name.
On the Turnpike you're going
I went to the Turnpike. It took me 110 minutes to get to watch 36 minutes of Lionel Messi.
I am telling you this, Mike, and I know we've talked about this over the years around here. It's been a fairly stark change to see civilization change so much with technology and the addiction to devices and the allergy to inconvenience. To watch in my lifetime that a sporting event, most people listening to this would say, especially if you get to my age or older, rather do it at home. Don't want to go and deal with the number of things, heat, drunk, and in Miami. If you put these games at 7 p.m., it's going to take me 2 hours to get there because trucks are on top of cars, are on top of chickens, are on top of dumpsters that are on fire, and they're all going down highways that are too small to handle the number of people that we have down here now. So if you give me a 7 p.m. game and you're telling me I don't get a tailgate 2 hours in front, I'm going to be in traffic for 2 hours to get from my home to wherever it is you're putting that game. We were invited last night, and I wanted to go, and I'm like, I'm not going in rush hour traffic to get there, not at 7. I won't get there till 8 because if I leave at 5, I'm not going to get there at a reasonable time.
It's really, really far, and that's always going to be the lament of the Miami soccer fan to support their team. I was encouraged, though, with my own eyes. I had seen construction happening at Melreese. I don't think they're going to nail this a very aggressive timeline of 2025. They're still digging up toxic soil.
Well, that's what you said, though, earlier when you said there was a trophy at stake. And I'm thinking to myself, they already got their trophy. They're building it by the airport. Like, the business will work because they got what they needed to this incredibly expensive land where they're going to be able to build a stadium. But when we're talking about attendance, the attendance story from last night, it's an old one here. It seems like we've been talking about it here this entire century. Gary Cohn and Keith Hernandez, old-timey baseball guys who live in an old-timey baseball market where the Mets still matter and the Mets are jealous of the Marlins season. They spent a ton of money. I've told you this before. If you just tabulate what the Mets are paying former Mets to play for other teams, that would be the 17th highest payroll in the sport. Just what they're paying for their former players to play for other people, that payroll is higher than the Marlins payroll. Just Verlanders and Scherzers and all those people. They come into town yesterday, and this breaks my heart as a Miami person who is so tired of the way that New Yorkers have infected this market my entire life. To see the Mets in this failure of a season successfully act as spoilers, and to have their announcers come in here and say that our crowds stink because baseball has treated Miami like a whorehouse, like a brothel for how long has it been now? 30 years of brothel in Miami. They noticed last night that there were no crowds for an exciting team that is relevant, that is overachieving, that is a surprise. Like, it's all the best things. The only thing the Marlins don't have, I mean, Jazz Chisholm, they don't have stars, or they don't have national stars, because baseball doesn't have many national stars. It's not even the four. They just have regional stars. Hell, Stephen A. Smith yesterday is getting baseball fans infuriated because he's saying baseball doesn't rate, baseball doesn't matter, Ohtani's not a draw. He's arguing with someone on his show named Fuzzy, a caller named Fuzzy, telling him to shut the hell up, that baseball doesn't matter. And this enrages baseball fans because baseball fans care deeply about baseball, and it's great right now. Like, baseball's a lot of fun to watch. That Marlins team is fun to watch, and it has all the ingredients that you want. But the betrayal is so profound, and I don't think this one's traffic, because the area around that stadium, that ballpark, should be able to feed enough people. Just the area around the ballpark, Latin people, in order to get a crowd. But that was a pathetic crowd last night for meaningful baseball against the Mets. Like, the Mets are used to mattering wherever they go, and especially here. Mets crowds are not bad crowds here. Never mind playoff crowds for the Marlins. Never mind a meaningful game for the Marlins. When the Mets play in town, you hear Mets fans. Where were the people last night?
This week personally hurt. Like, as someone who's believed that if you get the ingredients going, you will get that attendance to follow. This season has had all of it. It's been a fun season that's been competitive. They're a half game out of the wild card race. They made the trades at the deadline that you're asking for to bring in bats and get more competitive. The team is fun and young. They do have a local star, and yet, even with the Mets in town, despite the fact that the Mets are bad, and that did affect the amount of Mets fans who want to be there were only about 12,000 fans a night over the last 3 nights, and that's with $5 burgers on Monday and $5 beers all week. Like, the Marlins are doing everything that they can. They've made the game affordable. They're competing. They're doing all of the things that we ask for, and I think that's why, like, this week is so particularly infuriating, because still not that many people are at the ballpark for a wild card chase.
When you mention all the variables that it takes to actually get good attendance in this market, we have a representative sample size now that it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of a competitive team that is alive in a playoff chase and a star, preferably a pitcher. There have only been 2 players in the history of this franchise, and they've had great players in this franchise. Miguel Cabrera was there. They've had 2 players in the history of the franchise that actually meant something to attendance. It was Dontrelle Willis and Jose Fernandez on pitching days. They don't have stars. For as competitive as they are, they have people that you have to explain to an audience. Hey, Josh Bell's really good. Berger's pretty good. But the casual fan needs to see a superstar in this market. It's been proven to actually attend games.
For what it's worth, attendance on Sandy starts all through last year as he was winning a Cy Young, and this year at the start of the season were higher than your other games. When Eury Perez first showed up for the Marlins, more people were attending those games. They've had pockets this season that have been exciting and more attendance than you would expect, but you're right, Mike. People aren't showing up because they don't have, whether it's a name to associate, but I just think it's a general baseball problem, right? The Marlins, this is not the Marlins being cheap or not spending or not creating a team that's competitive or any of those things. The Marlins are essentially, they're doing their part. Fans are not there. Now, it's 30 years of betrayal and overcoming all of these things. Is it that this team needs to be this for 4 seasons before people believe?
I want to get back to the Stephen A. portion that you led with, Dan, because this is the second time he's kind of stepped into it. With Ohtani. The first time he had to apologize for it, and it was on the heels of an All-Star game where it was like a crowning moment for baseball in a star-making enterprise. They made Ohtani a star, and you had a league partner and its biggest star actually question the star power. However, Stephen A. does see data. He works for First Take, which is the most data-driven show. and not in terms of analytics when it comes to their opinions, but they know what the reason why they're always talking Dallas Cowboys is Dallas Cowboys always works. This is largely, and I mean this in terms of this country, is largely a nation that is capable of talking about two sports, really, football and basketball. The third biggest sport in this country is not even a professional sport. It's amateur football. It's college football. And all he's doing there is all he's had to do as an ESPN employee. You always want to say, why don't they talk more soccer? Why don't they talk more baseball? They flatly do not have the talents to talk about these things because they have been fortified and reassured through their ways that only three things matter on that network.
Let's explore this part of it for a second, though, because a lot of people think that the things that I say about Stephen A. Smith when we go back and forth, they hear all sorts of things that I don't intend and I don't feel about what a conqueror this human being is. And he's not wrong when he says, I will give my bosses what they want, which is more money, and I will give the customers what they want, whether they're on ESPN or Hannity, because I want to broaden my reach with calculations. I've told you this before about Colin Cowherd and how he knows the business of wrong, that wrong's not bad for his business.
I thought you were just talking about the Blazing Five.
Not even that is bad for his business. I don't believe him when he says he's kind of proud of going 0-9-1 to start the season.
That's a true gambling sicko right there, because I would also kind of be proud. It's
impressive. It's
you
as
can't do it if you
impressive.
try.
It's as impressive as going 9-0-1. Put it on the poll. Is going 0-9-1 against the spread more impressive? Is it more impressive than going 9-0-1 against the spread? But you have to understand, as we talk about media changing, media evolving, and the older people in media who have had these platforms, Mad Dog, Stephen A., Colin Cowherd, how they keep up with the democratization of content. Of anybody can go to a microphone now and start, and if you can get an audience, if you can build it, man, whether it's TikTok or YouTube, all the young people who don't have the resumes or credentials now have equal access to the audience, if you can earn it. Stephen A. Smith has sacrificed great portions of a balanced life in order to conquer this thing. He is crushing it right now. He took First Take from Max because he said, no, I don't want to do a nuanced, smarter show. I want to do an argument television show because I want broad appeal on morning television. A lot of people are home. They are not working. I don't care what their education is. I don't care what their dollars are at home. I care about getting their eyes on my television, however it is that I do it. Now, when you say, Mike, that there are only two sports we can talk about, football and basketball, well, those are the two sports that ESPN has business relationships with. They used to have one like that was much bigger with baseball, and I remember Baseball Tonight was a wonderful show, and baseball mattered more then. When ESPN goes into business with you to sell product, you have seen hockey get elevated when ESPN is even giving ancillary coverage. They're not pretending it's basketball or football. They're not pretending they have the talent to talk about all those things.
They're just platforming it with a roster that, outside of the people that are specific and doing ESPN Plus specific shows to it, a talent roster that is largely incapable of merely doing the thing that a good partner should do, which is talk about this so we can promote it. First Take is essentially a commercial for the rest of the network slate. That's why they go out to game days and they hype up, because they know with game day, with McAfee out in Boulder, Colorado, we can use this promotional machine, and the proof is in the pudding. Most streamed college football game of all time. Colorado State. Look at where those programs were just last year. It's asinine.
It is smart to lopside yourself and go where the eyes and the dollars are. But this is where baseball can get hurt and feel cheapened as something that was the national pastime. I believe that the future of sports broadcasting will have baseball games where the announcers are doing it the way they did during the pandemic, from a closet somewhere in Stores or Bristol, Connecticut, but they'll still pay $17 million for Joe Buck to be on site because they're not going to treat football that way. Football won't allow itself to be treated that way, and you will break the bank making sure that our product, in our partnership, that ESPN's not running our product, we're running ESPN. Baseball has to beg for ESPN to cover it that way. I remember when I started in this business having an argument with one of my initial producers at ESPN Radio because I loved talking about baseball. I love baseball. And I was telling him, later developed a gambling problem, still owes me money. I was telling him how much more I enjoy watching baseball games than football Sundays. And he was like, you're out of your mind. And at the time, it was still something that could be argued. But what's happened to football Sundays is the action is so intense for one day a week that it has been aligned with our attention deficit disorder, our need for fantasy leagues, our need for action, our need for stimuli. I can give you my Sundays or my Thursday nights. I don't have to give you every day for 162 games.
Which producer are you talking about?
Oh, he's talking about me.
It was before you.
Oh, because you described me.
I graduated to you. After learning from other gambling.
Well, either way, I swear I'm going to pay you. I just need this bonus to come in.
I was arguing on behalf of the merits of enjoying baseball.
I hate Brandon Staley. I'm just flat out, anytime I talk about Brandon Staley, dude costs me so much money. I hate him.
Let me ask this question of the audience and you guys, because when Mad Dog puts it that plainly, Mad Dog, just his nickname is Mad Dog. It's a persona. You have seen enough to know what is happening there. Just entertaining, emotional, funny, old. You tell me how you feel as an audience when you know that whatever the analysis is from the person giving you the analysis is totally infected by their emotional biases that they lost $10,000 on the game and therefore are ripping Deion Sanders a little extra for his coaching decisions because they lost $10,000 on the game. Like, how do you feel about that when that gets put out there that publicly as a transaction? I hear it all the time in Stugotz. I hear the undercurrent of it with your analysis and Chris Cody's analysis. I don't hear it everywhere on television where I've got angry at coach analysis because he simply, actually harmed your bank account, where you have less money to pay for things for your children because this person took it from you.
Juliet's flatly not going to private school anymore.
Oh, no.
Thanks to Brandon Staley's 27-0 blown lead against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That is the biggest hurt I have ever suffered. It wasn't even money that I had. It's money that I could have had.
Sambo Sally. He was with us all.
It's money that I had that you still owe me. I'm asking you.
I'm getting to it.
How often you see it in the analysis. And I think I prefer it Mad Dog's way. Just tell me. Tell me so I don't have to discern for myself, oh, this person's totally biased because they lost a bunch of money on the game. But it never used to be this.
Not to stick this conversation in the mud because I'm enjoying it and I'm running that risk right now. But things like Mad Dog saying I have $10,000 in this game is probably a huge variable in this huge melting pot of why it's super difficult going forward for ESPN to navigate its partnership with Penn because of how regulated this industry is. And their previous partner had all sorts of difficulty. We do it here on this show with Thursday Thunders and goof parlays that are promotional boosts. It's very rare where we're saying we're toting a line and we're giving you analysis on the game, and we're telling you, oh, you should take it. By the way, there is a lot of bad weather on the East Coast this week. Take the unders. But it's difficult because ESPN right now is a media company that'll show you the line. It'll be like Oregon minus 21.5. I think I got that one on the number. It'll be Oregon minus 21.5. And then right next to it presently, it'll have something called the FPI, the Football Power Index, and it'll give you a percentage of what a team has to win. And oftentimes, the line and the FPI don't make any sense. The FPI is created by ESPN. Now, I'm a regulator, and I am looking at ESPN appealing to be legalized in my state. And I'm looking at their television screen. I have Mad Dog telling me he's got 10 G's on Colorado. Underneath, I see a line, and I see an FPI that doesn't reflect the line. This is a paradox, my friends. That's actually difficult to get licensed that way, doing it the way that they are. I do think ESPN's in a little over their head with the Penn thing. And by the way, Penn reached a 52-week low like just 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot of people in this industry that are meeting this with a fair amount of scrutiny.
Mike is so right that everyone should have been freaking out about him admitting to just having 10K on the game, but yet we're still in a society where everyone got freaked out about him mentioning a gummy. Yeah. Even though we've come a long way with marijuana, but we're still in a spot where if you're on TV and you say I'm having a gummy later, everyone's like, "Whoa!"
Chris, I'm telling you that I don't recognize the shifting standards of what it is that I have done for a living. When not only does Mad Dog do that on television, but the reaction was largely, look at what wonderful television this is.
It's incredible.
Only half a gummy, huh?
Yeah, but ESPN doesn't know that maybe in the future, because they've gotten in the sports gambling game and is now the majority shareholder of a gambling company, things are going to change. And I think it's going to be quite noticeable when they do, when they finally get approval on this thing. And there's no one really at ESPN as the large stakeholder in this gambling company that has that kind of experience. They're going to be leaning on a company that just threw a Hail Mary that finally found a company dumb enough to actually accept a licensing deal. I think it's going to be a disaster.
Put it on the poll, please, at Le Batard Show. Do you say 10 G's or 10K?
Well, one thing that you don't with the IRS is you don't say $10,001. Yeah, exactly.
Not what I asked you.
That's just more advice.
Pro tip.
Don't need your help there in terms of adding undercurrent of ways that you scheme and cajole and move around. Tony's got that corner.
Tony knows that the IRS considers anything 10,000 and under a gift, and you don't have to explain
yourself.
yourself.
I also never said 10K. It would have been like, yeah, I got $100 on it.
That's a big bet, man.
Just say a unit.
That Mad Dog's made some money feeding at this trough. When
do you think he's actually putting 10K on that?
Yes.
Really? I never that is.
Yes, that's a lot of money.
That would be a move to lie on the most people, like Tony said, lie smaller. If he's just like, I want everyone to think this.
You had $55 on that Western Michigan game against Iowa that you watched while you should have been watching your child ice skate. Correct?
2 unis.
Yeah, but $25 is a pretty pathetic uni.
Before we get out of the local hour,
we don't uni shame.
I wanted to put it on the poll, please, Juju, at Le Batard Show. Do you shame your gambling friends when they bet only $25 on a game? Yes or no? But a couple of things basketball related that I wanted to talk about locally. The University of Miami is capitalizing on the success that it has had. I don't know Jalil Bethea, a 5-star recruit that they have landed, but it's the greatest recruit. I'm reading that it's the greatest prospect that they've ever had, more than Darius Rice, more than any of these prospects that they have had in their history, that this is the greatest prospect that they've had. And both Mike and I were talking to some people around the program where Wooga has made a leap, where they already have a player who was scared as a freshman to shoot 3-pointers, but has now made an amazing leap. I was asking Larinaga last year, have you seen a leap like this from one year to the next? And now people are saying that he's gotten even better than he was. This was a person who was afraid to shoot. They lost against Kansas because in the second half he played for 4 minutes, and at the top of the key they were daring him to shoot, and he did not want to shoot. Evidently, he must have learned something from the pain of that, because the way they're talking about this kid at the program is something that I have not heard.
My bold prediction for this season is that Baby Food and Nigel Pack aren't going to be recognized as the best player come season's end. Wooga Poplar is going to be a lottery pick. He made a tremendous jump from year to year last year, and it's a testament to Coach L's coaching development. But he made a similar leap this offseason. I was in Europe as the men's basketball team was over in Europe, and people were raving about how he was playing. This is a 3-and-D guy that is going to have a future in the league. And Coach L, outside of the Adidas scandal and injury, because remember, we did have a backcourt once of Bruce Brown and Lonnie Walker that could never stay healthy, and they ended up losing to Loyola on a buzzer beater. And Loyola took Miami's spot in that Final Four that year. is a team that's gone Elite Eight, Final Four, showing year after year improvement. And now in the NIL age, this market has already shown with the Cavender twins what it can do to one's brand. And Coachella has shown what he can do at George Mason and here, without an Adidas scandal, what he can do. And when we get Poplar, it's with development and just as a general program builder. And the NIL has stepped up to the plate. I can't tell you all the people that thought the bottom was going to fall out when John Ruiz got into his trouble the first time around. And now what? Top 10 recruiting class in football. Now the best recruit ever in basketball. No one has anything to say. Barry Jackson's not putting up BS tweets that are uneducated about the NIL system here. Kane's Connection has done a great job.
Whoa, why'd you sideswipe Barry Jackson?
Because he was uninformed when he did that. And
media legend.
Hey, I reached out to Barry personally and explained to him how wrong he was, because that's the kind of man I am.
But you just took him out here on...
I think, well, the proof is in the pudding, Dan. They just got a 5-star recruit. I mean, sounding the alarms and saying, oh, Miami is in trouble now without John Ruiz. Same thing that Darren Ravel did. It's uneducated.
Mike, going back to Ugo really quick. You're saying he was an excellent athlete, excellent defender, and all of a sudden now he's got a shot that's better to put him into that lottery pick section?
Yes, he's going to be a lottery pick. He's going to be a lottery pick. Take it to the bank.
Oh, we're all doing this?
No,
well, we were.
I really wish we would stop doing that.
No, I stopped.
Is every team in this market good? You just got me thinking. UM football, UM basketball. Inter Miami is probably the crappiest team right now, and we have Messi.
What?
We have Bobby Ballsacks, and we're playing for a cup on Wednesday.
Thinking, when you guys were having that conversation about the Marlins not drawing, and I know this is going to give David Sampson a victory, so I don't want to do that, but are the other teams being good hurting the Marlins? Like, I'm going to the Dolphins game on Sunday. I'm like, I want to go to this home opener. Didn't even think, I should maybe go to the Marlins game this weekend. Why? I don't know.
Because it's
just
not
saying.
baseball season anymore. They're inconveniencing everybody with this run.
Is that not also just being a Broward guy getting down to Miami? Like the traffic we were talking about earlier in the local hour? Nice. Like, it's just difficult for you to get there. The same way that Inter Miami fans in Miami are struggling to get up to Broward.
I'm going on Friday.
The only way the Marlins are going to get talked about is if they make the playoffs. Because at any moment, the Miami Heat might trade for Damian Lillard, and there goes any of the minimal coverage.
We are going to talk about that for a second, but Chris Cody is indeed, you have correctly identified this, Jeremy. He is a Broward guy who descends from a long lineage of Broward guys.
I also drive down here every day, so it's
you take a
Bright
train.
line, baby.
Did you go to the Inter-Miami match last night?
I couldn't because I had bowling.
How long?
I sold my ticket.
That's a very Broward guy thing to do, by the way.
Yeah, yes, absolutely is.
Pathetic sentence.
I mentioned earlier before you got here that it took me 110 minutes to drive up to the game, and I'm very envious of you. But I really wish that someone was also at this game, because things like public announce address people, that they don't matter to anyone that doesn't go to the game. Inter-Miami, the PA announcer mentioned that he's no longer doing games. And he was fine.
Was that a mutual? What happened there?
I don't know, but the replacement, it felt like they just had a contest inside the office. Hey, who wants to call this? Dude was shook. And they definitely put an emphasis on being bilingual, because there's more of that with this guy. He sounded like a kid who was nervous, and at times he wouldn't even say players' names when they subbed in. He would just say the numbers. He mispronounced people's names. And you see all across the stadium, they've really fixed things up. There's so much pyro. The food has been elevated, because Messi came here, and they're supposed to be a standard. And it seems as though all the budget came out of the PA system.
Juju, please put this on the poll. Is it a truly pathetic sentence to say, I couldn't see Messi because I had bowling?
Well, I mean, I got season tickets, baby. I sold those bad boys.
Don't get so defensive. I'm just asking the audience whether they believe it to be a pathetic sentence, because you have to understand the way I'm experiencing this. Every time I see you, I see your father, I see you as a child, I see you going to rent dirty bowling shoes from the 1980s that haven't been at a bowling alley that is nearby because you're a Broward guy.
There's only one bowling alley in Miami, by the way. There's 9 in Broward. There's only one in Miami.
That's not true.
That's
not true.
That's what a bowling guy told
There's
me.
only one traditional bowling alley
Bird
in
Bowl.
Miami.
There's Bird Bowl. Name
There's
another
one here on
bowling
the
alley.
beach.
That's the best one.
There's the one here on the beach, Dan, right?
Was there one on the
I'm
beach?
telling
There
you,
used to
there's
be a
one.
Lucky
Yard
Strike.
House.
There
used to
was
be a
one
Lucky
where
Strike.
that only exists for Nevin Shapiro to give an oversized check to Donna Shalala. It's
Is
just
it
Bird
just
Bowl.
Bird
R.I.P.
Bowl?
Don Carter's.
Yeah. Man, you really miss Bobby Ballsack back in a brace. You would have loved it.
Splitsville was there too. Now it's gone in Sunset Place.
I couldn't be happier to be there last night. My team is in 4th place out of 32. We are crushing it right now.
More coverage of Chris Cody's bowling team coming up next.